Okay, so this is really a extra for the non-standard tiles. I'm regretting not doing them as two totally separate videos, if I'm honest. So, last video we looked at using one of the tiles that was played in the last word. So if I played Bob and I had A-N-N-A, then I could do banana because I can have, I missed an A there, because I can use the B from Bob. The wildcard, or blank tile, as it is in Scrabble, obviously can take on any single letter it likes, but once it's taken on that letter, it remains that letter. So it's not a wildcard that can be used over and over again. It is a tile, it only gets used once. And there's several things we need to do to implement it. This is not actually quite as easy as the previous video suggested. So on our list, we've basically got the different tasks, and what I like about this in terms of its potential for being in the real exam is you can rack up quite a lot of marks for the big final question. The only thing I have a slight reservation is that if you've looked at your EAD, and I hope you have, you'll see that there isn't a question with lots and lots and lots of little bits in it. They tend to be just 2 parts or 3 parts, so you know, a coding task and a testing section. But I think going through this and making sure you've got the skills to implement this would help you in a whole number of areas. So there's a little change to the class, changing queue of tiles. There's a change to the tile dictionary. So for the add in queue of tiles, obviously we need to be able to add a blank, not just the letter tiles. Once you've done that, you then of course need to be able to handle it, and traditionally a blank is 0 in terms of its score, so that's fairly easy to handle in the tile dictionary, and in fact I think just hard code it. Don't need to be. Then we've got the bit that was discussed last video, check word in tiles, an update after a loud word, and we probably need to play around with those training hands, put a couple of wildcards in there. Right, let's have a look at the coding solution. This is add. There could be about a million different ways of actually doing this bit. So this bit was already there. And what we've done is we've added a random number generator, and we've said if it's every 10th tile, effectively in this case, will be a blank, which is pretty generous actually. But in terms of testing, it's, you know, we don't have to stick to the Scrabble rules. So we've said, you know, if it's that, stick in that character. You can't really do it processing it using the random number, other than we could say that times 27 and then say if random number equals 27 and then just assign the contents of the rear to a particular character. But we can't do it using an offset. And that's the only change we need. Let's quickly go back. We now need to handle the tile dictionary. So create tile dictionary is a relatively straightforward piece of code, but one which is ripe for being asked questions of. If you do not understand this little block of code, you will definitely lose marks in the exam. Whether it's in a coding bit or whether it's in the section C asking questions bit, you know, this is a little bit odd, to be honest with you, but and you saw, if you've watched my first validation video, I prefer a string.contains, which would perform roughly the same action. But I think you do need to, you do need to understand how this works, and the idea of, what is the -1 return value actually represent. Just hit this, hit F1, and you can see that I've got an array, I've got a value, it's going to return the index. If it's not there, it returns -1. So that's roughly how it works. But it's a way of performing a lookup. Now we're going to leave this alone because it works, and all I've done is allow it to go all the way through this, completely ignore it, and then right at the very end, because it's not within the alphabetic range, we're just going to have a little hard code and say, let's just add character 42, which I'm sure you all know off by heart, is the asterisk character. Obviously you need to be able to read the exam carefully and apply whatever character you like, but writing that character, writing a value, job done. So check word is in tiles is really similar to the previous tutorial. We're just adding an extra else if statement, and we're saying if it contains our wildcard, and as we would do normally, we would then stick it into the copy in terms of just deleting it, as in turning it from a character to a null character. This does rely on them typing in the word with the blank in the right place. Now that's reasonable, because of course that's what you do in Scrabble. If you've got, PA blank NTS, then you actually play it as a blank. So that's how we're going to do it. So basically, when it gets to the actual asterisk that the person's typed in, or the blank tile that the person's typed in, it would say that's an acceptable use of the word. And we need to sort of really worry it where we're checking the word is valid against the dictionary. So now we come to the really interesting bit, and that is this word actually in the allowed list? So let's go to the code. Obviously we're going to be looking at check word is valid, and this is actually quite intricate. If we look at what this was like at the start, and here's a commented out version I've got, you can see it's really simple. Is the current word equal to one of the words in the list, in the allowed words file? If it is, whack it into true. As soon as we start having to allow for wildcards, we can't do that. We've got to assess each character individually. And this is a bit of a pain. So we're going to have to create some more booleans and some more counters. We've of course still got the loop that's going to loop through each word in the allowed words. So we're going to go through every single word in allowed words, but stop obviously if we find a valid word. Now we've got another loop, and this feels like it should be a while loop, but because we want to stop if we hit a wildcard, then we need to use a while loop, unfortunately. And there's three terms. Keep going for the length of the word, or keep going until the length of the allowed word. Now this is really important. If you don't sort this out in your head, then you're going to get some out of range exceptions. So imagine I'm comparing bananas with apple, and for some bizarre reason we get to the end of apple. As soon as I hit the seventh letter, I'll get an out of range exception. Or la is a valid word, and so is land. So you would correctly compare the first two letters, and when you hit the third letter, the N, land would be fine, but the allowed word la would not be. Basically, you've got to make sure you don't get an out of range exception for either the word that you've posted or the allowed word that you're checking. And then finally, of course, we want to only keep going until we've realised that there's a character that doesn't match. After that, it's quite straightforward. We say that obviously if the letter in your word matches the letter in the allowed word, that's a match, that's fine. And we're saying, well, I've said or, okay, I've used and not, but or if it's a wildcard, then that's fine as well. The reason why I've assigned this negatively is because I don't care how many letters do match. It's the fact that as soon as one letter doesn't match, the word doesn't match. Then got a counter here, and then I've got a counter here for my external loop. This is just to say, if I've been able to get to the end of a word and all of my letters match, i.e. I've initialised it as true, nothing's made it go false, then actually that must be a valid word. And of course, if we're checking a word is valid, we need one word to be valid. Let's get rid of that. Get your head around that. That's quite a nasty little bit of logic. So our next thing is how we update after the allowed word. Of course, we need to get rid of the tiles that have been placed, and as you'd expect, it's exactly the same as the current one, but we added a cheeky little thing saying if it's a wildcard, get rid of it because we'll have used it. And of course, when you're looking at the letters in Word, so because we've passed that wildcard through and we've processed it as an asterisk, then it's relatively straightforward. Last but not least, probably need to just do something to help us test. My personal preference, I've gone too far, is just to stick, it's at the bottom, isn't it, of course, is just to stick in a wildcard at the end of the hard codes. Of course, if we test it and we've correctly assigned wildcards to be added to the tile queue, then that's fine, that would work. But I think just having a little hard-coded thing is useful. So let's run the code just to prove it works. So I'll run the training game. Look, you can see that's there. Hand is there, there's no else, let's try land. So that's using one wildcard. And we can see that's valid. Who cares what we pick? And we've got one wildcard, but what we'll do is we'll try and use it twice. So we'll go, we've got net, we've got no N in this particular thing, so if I type in man, that should be accepted, and then the star. But if we put it as my mind's gone blank, so I go for magnetic, this should be allowed, it's a valid word. even though when we look we can see there's no G, so the star is